By practice, maybe I'm a programmer, maybe. And by profession, I lead a little team on my startup. And today I want to become a storyteller. I want to tell stories. Stories about space and us. Like how do we connect? And I will tell one story about space and us, and many little stories which construct the big stories. So I have to tell the little stories before I start the big story. So a couple of months ago, I was invited by this in Germany, how they call it, MIN student. So these are the potential students who are finishing their schools and want to start university. And if they want to university, and some intelligent guy came up and said, okay, Earth observation is pretty nice. Why don't you tell a story which tells about Earth observation? So they become very interested about Earth observation stuff. And when I was telling them these stories, one guy, he asked a very interesting questions. I was telling them, with satellite technology, we can monitor crops, and thus we can ensure food security. And at the end of 1 hour presentation, a guy stand up and said, why the hell you take so much pressure? Satellite is complicated stuff, and you are trying to do it for agriculture? It doesn't make any sense. Because you can buy tomato in the supermarket. So of course, then I started thinking maybe my presentation was not good enough that convinced students that they can start becoming to do with Earth observation. Then I started preparing a presentation. And by the meantime, I found my own startup. Thankfully, that's also funded by ESA, by coincidence. And in that startup, we try to detect boundaries. And when we started detecting boundaries, we say, okay, what is the definition of a boundary? The boundary can be a building, yeah, where is your fences? A boundary can be an agricultural field, a boundary can be a country, even maybe the globe if you see it circle. That's also a boundary. And then we said, okay, we enhance the study I was doing for these kids. Okay, let's push some boundary issues in the presentation. And by profession, I'm very much connected with the agricultural technology institutes. So maybe most of my boundaries will go for agriculture, but somehow they're related to agriculture. But those all stories tell the same story. That each boundary has a story behind it. As I say, boundaries about telling stories. So it's an image about in Bolivia. So the first time when I saw this image in Google Earth, and I was wondering why this has such a funny shape. Yeah, see? It's something maybe concentrated in the middle, and then it has a border. And then I started looking for why it's like this. And then I was reading, and I knew the story. And the story was pretty simple. They were cultivating there the palm trees which generates oil. And those oil requires to be transported somehow to somewhere. So the farmers who does it, they said, okay, what about we create a collection point in the center and then connect all the fields to the center, and then they can collect all the products in one place and then ship it. And I said, okay, then I understand what is happening with this 4, 5, 6 rectangle. But what's happening here? Why it's not like this, like those I see here? I still don't know why. It's a very fresh image from last year. I still don't know why. This is the southern Sudan, a place called Kassala, where in 1975, most probably, they started an irrigation project funded by World Bank. They said, okay, you have desert, you cannot grow food, but you need food. What about we fund you to develop something so that you can irrigate? So from then on, still this project exists, and you see these funny patterns like this or these patterns. This is because of irrigation channel. And a very recent authentic study find out in this region, due to converting the desert into agricultural fields, precipitation decreased by 50%. It's a very recent result. Then the question we ask, okay, wherever these sort of things are happening, it's happening in Morocco, it's happening in Algeria, it's happening in Saudi Arabia, what about maybe the precipitation is reducing there as well? We don't know. So it's Algeria. It's a very big lake, which was the primary water reserve to grow food. So this southern part was the whole region where they're growing food for the last 10 years. But as you can see, though it's greenish, it's water, but here is a boundary. These places are not productive anymore because there is no water anymore. On the northern part, there are some water. First, when I saw this data, I said, okay, maybe this is because of the elevation. Yeah, some part there are water, some part there are not. But then when I started digging deeper, I figured out, no, this is not because of water. This is because of two different aquifer, like the groundwater storage. So one aquifer had the exact boundary like this, and another one on the southern part. So northern part is one aquifer which still there are some water, and the southern part there is no water anymore. And another recent study says in this whole northern Africa will have water for the next 15 years, but then no more. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's a truth, maybe. So in the time of deforestation, it's a story about Nepal. This is one of the largest places they grow agriculture, and they feed whole Nepalese population. But they are very intelligent. So on the southern part, it's the sanctuary where there are a lot of wildlife habitats. These are agricultural field, and on the right, that's whitish part, you also saw agricultural field. But what they did, they keep a connection between the northern forest and the southern one. So they are still actually a great example which tells us how the nature can live with harmony. It's a great example that agriculture is happening, deforestation is controlled, and at the same time, they are feeding their whole country. Of course, it was an extremely interesting image for me when I saw the first time. If you see from the right to the left, the direction or the movement of the field changed. So the agriculture started on the right first, and they started to grow on the left. And from the right to the left, the whole evolution, maybe it took 10 years. But each time they changed the direction of the field. So the central direction. So maybe this field has a direction like this, but this folds has a direction like that. Then I started asking these questions, why it's like this? It's nothing, rocket science is very simple. The water flows in the direction. So the farmers who started cultivating or designing their fields, without even knowing, they were designing the field like this. Which gets more water, those lands are more expensive. So the fields you see more green, those are the fields which have still water in the late season in July. disc half full, incomplete. This is an image of northern Saudi Arabia. I don't know who thought about it. If I was the Saudi government, I would rethink it several times. Because they don't have surface water. What they did, they just pumped out the water like oil they do, and they created literally a desert into cultivation land. And they are doing it for the last 30 years. And then when I saw this picture, okay, this is a massive amount of field. In Saudi Arabia, there is no water in the surface, and they only have fossil water, which takes more than 1,000 years to recharge. That means if you take 1 liter out, it will take 1,000 years to get the water back in the ground so that you can pump it out. And there is no precipitation, but they are doing this. And then I said, okay, that must be a very important reason why they do it. And after digging deeper, I figure out they grow something called alfalfa. It's some sort of grass. And those grass, they feed to the cow. And those cows produce milk. And they are the biggest milk exporter in Middle East. So more or less, they're exporting their fossil water through exporting the milk. So all these stories I told until now, it's about water. So a lot of time I heard about water war. But now after I saw this, I believe it's not wrong. It might happen. So this is the story about Zimbabwe and Zambia. They are fighting for, I don't know, 10, 15 years with one lake. This is one very big lake. So 50% of the lake, it goes on the right to Zimbabwe and on the left to Zambia. And most of the time you read news in the paper that there are armed conflict, people are shooting and blah, blah, blah. But if you really dig deeper, you see the cause is water. Because in Africa, there is a real problem with water. If you don't have water, you cannot do anything. And you don't have the technology to pump it out, what you have underground. So the surface water is everything which is very vivid in whole Africa. And why they are fighting right now with this lake, you see on the top right corner, these are some agricultural field. It's massive. It's like 5 kilometers in diameter. It's really massive. And right now the fighting topics is, the Zimbabwe say this lake is 50% owned by us and 50% is owned by you. But you are taking all the water for your agriculture, so that means you are taking more water. And Zimbabwe say, okay, build a dam, I don't mind. I'm taking my water. And Zimbabwe cannot do it because of the terrain. Those surface does not allow them to grow food. So they cannot actually make those circular field on the right because of undulated terrain. So they are fighting. Maybe it's nonsense to us, but that's the truth. They are fighting with a couple of fields, and that might lead to war. So water war can happen. Water is also something to do with soil. It's about geology. So if you have a big area, it's not very big, it's 25 kilometers. On the right you see green, on the left you see brown. It's mostly the cornfield. On the left, the corns are ripe early because of the soil type, and on the left they're still growing. So maybe on the left the farmer got 25 deciton per hectare, and on the right they got 30 deciton per hectare. It's an assumption theory. But if you have a longer growing period, you have more food or more crops. So geology guides the land price, which agricultural land is expensive. I'm from Bangladesh. I couldn't resist to put this picture there. So in this picture you see, just notice from here to the north and from here to the south. It's a one river, but extremely different to look. And also notice there is a little channel, which seems like very uniform. It is uniform. because it is man-made. So, and this is the border between Bangladesh and India. So what the Indian government did, they put a dam, a massive giant dam. It's a very popular one. It's a story to 20 years old. So they put a dam, in summer they get the water, and through this left channel, they pass it through India country, because this is the border of Bangladesh, yeah? So they put a dam very intelligent way, and they pass the water for their agriculture. That's not a problem. That was not a problem 20 years ago. But now it's a big problem because population is growing, but land is not. So the conflict is arising every day. And you see these rivers are dying. Maybe this river was flowing from here before. But due to the water lag, the river found a new path. So those people who had land here, they lost it. Now the government is facing a conflict. Okay, what I do? Those people who lose the land due to this river, they should get a land, but where? Who should give it? How? One dam can create a really massive problem. So playing with nature, maybe it's not nice all the time. I don't know what to say about this image. It's very intriguing. When I saw this image, I found it very interesting. So on the left, it's Palestine, and on the right, it's Israel. There is a little border, and this little border is 50 meters, just 50 meters. That means standing on the left, you can see what's going on the right. And if somebody stand on the right, they can see what's going on the left. I don't know how the people think, or if I was standing in one of the side, if I saw the other side, of course I would think. I don't know what I would think, but I would think something. But I don't know how these people think. It's a very important question. Which came first, agriculture or diamond? And this question I never thought before I saw this image. So you see on the left, there is no green. This is South Africa. But this is the most important region for South African, where you find the greatest diamond, the largest, the biggest, the colorful one. And when it started, I don't have access to the image up before 30 years in such resolution, so I cannot tell. But I want to know what happened. And immediately, in the middle of nowhere, so from here to the nearest, you can find civilization is maybe 500 to 700 kilometers. But you immediately see some agriculture. So the first idea I thought, okay, maybe to feed these people who are working here, the Namibian, some people found, okay, we do some corn growing there, and we feed these people so that they can buy. And it is sustainable for the last 30 years. It's great. Two countries doing business without the consent of the government. But it's working pretty good. So when I was in school, I heard about it that if I split the whole world in 4 parts, 1 part is land, 3 parts is water. And after I become like adult, I learned how to split the land. But now when I became a data scientist, maybe, now I see, okay, it's not only about splitting land, it's also about playing with terrain. Maybe you have 1/4 of your land you have in the whole world where you can live or grow food or do some forestation. But most of the time you cannot do it because these are stony mountains in the southern part of Bulgaria. And this is the only region where they have soil, not stone, where they can grow food. So if it is true, I don't know, if it is true that by 2050 where we have to feed 9 billion people, and if you have such conditions, maybe you will not see 20 different kinds of tomato in the supermarket anymore. So it's an alarm. It looks like a leaf, but this leaf has a story. It's whatever is the name, but it's very close to the Giza, you know, the pyramid. It's very close. Once upon a time, this whole green part you see as like a leaf, it was like this. It was a big lake. It started to getting dried out. People started to move in the lake. And this is the situation now. Maybe in the next 10 years, the northern lake, you see a little bit of dark black that will not be there anymore. If it's the case, all these farmers who have the field there grow food and feed the Middle East people, what's going to happen then? It's not very far, it's going to happen in our lifetime. In 10 years, not our lifetime. On the other hand, Europe is beautiful. You see this big barrier where you see dark, black, and some sort of greenish? It's extremely intelligent what Netherlands did. So they built a really giant, massive dam. Because the snow is melting, the water is coming. It's a sweet water, what you can reuse to feed your agricultural land. But on the other hand, you have saline water, what you cannot use. Because if you put the saline water in the field, you are bringing salt in the land. So this land will lose productivity. So they found a genius solution. What they did, they found that they built a dam. They said, okay, sweet water until you come, I eat all of it. And when I lose the balance, I lose it to the sea. So what they did, literally, they tamed the ocean to grow food. This is the Atacama Desert, if you know, where the Inca civilization started. It's 3,000 meters high. It's cold 7 degrees. No precipitation. So literally it's impossible to do any kind of vegetation there. And in 2016, it's a very recent one, in August, maybe July or August, okay, whatever, forget it. So something July and August, and the previous image I saw, it's from 2015. This thing was not there. This is massive. From here to here, it's like 7 kilometers. It's really massive. And when I saw this, I started asking some of my friends in Latin America and America who does it. And by jumping through one another, I ended up in New York Times. So I was very lucky that I got an appointment with one of the senior journalists, and that guy was flying through Frankfurt, and he gave me 1 hour. And I asked him, okay, do you have any idea what is that? He said, okay, can you tell me how do you produce these images? Because most of the day we don't have any news, so maybe when we don't have any news, we can use these images to write some news. I said, that's not the purpose. I want to know what's going on there. So I hunted several people, and then I found a company which I cannot reveal. It's a chemical company, agrochemical company. So one ex-agrochemical company is doing it, and I got the information from Y chemical company because they want to increase their market share. So sometimes they use this information as an intelligence. What's going on here? So as I said, my main interest is boundary, and the boundary can be real complex. I don't have to say anything more. You see, it's really complex. It's beautiful, but maybe the farmer who produced this in a collaborative fashion, they don't know what they did. Yeah. So sometimes it's nice that the farmer sees from the top. So again, Bangladesh, this is a very important story to tell. So in Bangladesh, in southern part, we have a region called hill tracts, where 22 different kinds of Aboriginal people live. So our government made a deal with these Aboriginal people. They said, okay, no Bangladeshi will go in that Aboriginal land so that these Aboriginal people can live in peaceful. But this is what I see in 2015. There's some sort of industrial agricultural production is happening there. There is not that much Aboriginal who need such amount of food. Something wrong is going there. I don't know. Okay, deforestation everybody is talking about, and this is the image from 2015, but Google still says that's a sanctuary. I don't know what happened to all these animals who used to live there, thinking that that's their home. Meat is still our, so this is the, maybe you already know, this is Brazil, yeah? And this is this deforestation happening in Amazon. And this is the fresh, which was not there in 2015, but in 2016 it happened. That means the deforestation rate is still extremely high in Brazil. And the main reason the deforestation is happening is because of the meat. They are not actually producing something to feed people. They're producing soybean, which goes to the cow, and they grow cow, and they bring the cow in Europe. So actually we are eating Amazon, more or less. So this is an extremely important animal, rhinos. It's always in the news. So this is South Africa. This was also a sanctuary in Limpopo, but now it doesn't look like a sanctuary anymore. I don't know where these rhinos went. So this marshland is something like a wetland, yeah. So this wetland was very tall, yeah. It doesn't stick in the frame, so it's going southwest, yeah. So some agricultural farmer moved from here to here. This pig farmer became rich, and maybe, I don't know, in the next 5-10 years, this farmer will become rich. The land is changing, but nobody is thinking that's the place which is getting brown, what to do with it. So sometimes, if you're very lucky, you also see volcanic eruption in the satellite image. United States, it's extremely controlled, but land grabbing also happens there. The city is growing, moving from this direction to that direction. Agricultural is moving from that direction to that direction. If I survive the next 10 years, I would like to see what is the shape happens to this water bottom. 2016, this year, was a very bad year for African, whole Africa, because due to the less precipitation and disease, the agricultural production was less than 50%. I don't know what they're going to eat. Okay, it's a funny picture. You see, it's an RGB, like you see a photo, it's something like this. But you see different colors. And these colors are generated because of the salt. If you have different kind of salt, you know where to mine. Maybe you are looking for potassium, and this potassium found is in this color. So if you are a potassium miner, you know which farmer to contact to grab his help. This is another very extremely interesting story which is happening by Aboriginal people who doesn't speak any language, like us, yeah? So there is no news. So it took 3 months to get this news, but the news is these Aboriginal people got something called microfinance. It's some sort of loan, yes? And these loans are triggering these Aboriginal people to start doing agriculture. And you see, there is a little thin river. You don't see blue, it's just dry. And all this clearing up is happening along this river. So microfinance can do a lot. When you see this picture, do you think that buying tomato is very easy? This is the only thin river you have, and these all are stones. And they are simply graining stones, cultivating soil, not agriculture, cultivating soil, and then they are trying to grow fruit. It's really complicated story what's happening in Africa. This is India. When I saw this picture, my first question was, why there is a straight line? There is, you see green and here is you brown. And just by doing some simple intersection of the groundwater, the boundary, this was the answer. So the groundwater, you have a boundary from here where you have excess. On the other side you don't have. This is the story still I'm hunting. I don't know it yet. So this is Zika Ethiopia. Maybe you can start having a look. Still I don't know. So it has something like you saw in the first slide. Some collection points and the fields radiates from one center. When I asked some of my Ethiopian friends, can anybody explain why it is like this? But nobody told me the story about collection points. I got one story, but I don't know how authentic this is. And here, this very close to the Somalian border, they define the ownership of the field based on which field touch which village. So this field, yeah, it has a lot of fields like that. Whichever field touches this village, this is owned by this village. So you want to create a new field like, I don't know, 1 meter thin here, which grow like that. So then you can have more land for one particular village. So the message is pretty simple. Now I'm trying to become a social scientist, so I try to see problem not through a machine, but like how humans see it. So to my understanding, it's pretty simple, and philosophers tell the same. If you see a problem, if you think that's a problem, the first question comes, can you name a problem? Because if you cannot name it, you cannot tell it to somebody else to look for it. And if you cannot name a problem, this is why you cannot see it. Maybe some images you never saw before. So it's very important that we realize a problem, we name the problem, then we can find the solution. Thank you very much.